This is the PA Startup Podcast, episode number 16. This is the PA Startup Podcast, where we help pre-PA students, current PA students, and new grads start their careers as physician assistants. I'm your host, Chris Darst. We are glad you're here. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the PA Startup Podcast, where we are hoping to help you on your path to becoming a PA. Whether you're pre-PA, current PA, or a new grad, it's a long road, but it's a fun road, and it's a great road. So today's episode is another Day in the Life of series. Today my guest is Nick Kincaid. He is a pulmonary and critical care PA. He is a great guy. He offers some great tidbits of advice today, and it's just really interesting to hear what a day in his life is like. I've never worked pulmonary, so I don't know what his job's like. I don't know what it's like to see patients in the office like he does and round on patients on the floor and things like that. So we get into that. I also learned, this is a sidebar, I learned to always have the microphone going. He made a comment about how the spelling of his name, Kinkead, is Gaelic, and he said it's very similar to Sinead O'Connor. And just the way he said it just cracked me up, and I didn't have the microphone going. So that would have been a perfect little Easter egg to put at the end for you. But anyways, this is my conversation with Nick Kincaid, pulmonary and critical care PA, and I'll be back at the end to fill in any gaps. All right, Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Yeah, you bet. Real quick, and I didn't tell you this beforehand, grab your phone real quick.
Sure.
And if you would look at like your text app, is that an iPhone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, open your texting and tell me what your top 3 most recently used emojis were.
Ooh.
Do you use emojis?
I do.
Yeah.
Occasionally. That's kind of a new thing.
Here's the deal. I think it's better than a psychiatric evaluation. So tell me what your 3 most recent ones were.
This is going to reflect badly on me, but I have a thumbs up, the sunglasses emoji, and a fist.
Oh, nice.
So I don't exactly know what that means, but
you're giving. I like the thumbs up because you can just send that back. And sometimes it means like, yeah, I'll get bread at the store. And other times it's like, you're an idiot.
Yep. It's mostly the latter on that one. So
I love it. Awesome. Well, you are a PA in pulmonary and critical care.
That's correct.
Is that right?
Yep.
Awesome. And you are how far out of school?
So I graduated May of 2017. So I started, licensing takes a little while. So I started working basically beginning of July of 2017. So almost a year. Okay, good. So, but you've been graduated for a year, so roughly a year out. Yep.
Awesome. Good. And this is your first job as a PA?
Yep. First job right out the bat.
Cool.
So.
Good. Well, before we get into the job part, how did you decide on the PA profession to begin with?
Yeah, great question. So a little like background on me, I'm a military kid. Dad served in the Army, and so my first exposure to healthcare was at Womack Army Medical Center in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And my parents kind of encouraged me to kind of broaden my horizons, kind of figure out, what do you want to do with your life? So I had the opportunity to shadow / volunteer with a orthopedic physician assistant working with wounded GIs coming back from Iraq. And that was kind of my first exposure to healthcare. I mean, I wasn't, really exposed to the healthcare field. My parents weren't in the healthcare field at all, and so it was that exposure to wounded vets coming back that kind of piqued my interest in medicine, and kind of I was hook, line, and sinker from then on. So
that's cool. That's a unique view on healthcare, like wounded combat. Soldiers. That's pretty incredible. Most people, it's like, oh, my grandma was sick and the PA took care of her. And here you are looking at like people fighting for freedom, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a really, it was just great. It was a great experience, just to kind of see, soldiers come back that fought for their country and ended up being wounded, in orthopedic medicine, it'd be dealing with nerve damage and muscle loss and things like that. So I really kind of got to see some really sick guys coming back, and from then on, I was kind of sold on medicine.
This is what you want to do.
Yep.
So then, how old were you about then? I mean, was that?
So I was, I think I was like 15, 16. So I was pretty young.
Pre-college. So you kind of knew
pre-college, the
direction you were going to go freshman year of college.
Yep.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. What was your degree in?
So I went to the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and I got a bachelor's of science in biotechnology with a minor in chemistry.
Oh, wow.
Kind of came with the degree.
Okay.
So I did undergrad in Omaha.
And then did you go right through to PA school? Did you apply right away, or did you take some time off?
Sometimes I reflect back and I wish I did, just kind of did it all in one whack. But there were some PA schools require patient care hours and, certain experience that I was lacking during my undergrad years. So I had a year break between undergrad and PA school. So during that gap year, I did several things. I was a patient attendant, so kind of like a care tech at Nebraska Medicine in Omaha. I was involved with the anatomy class at my undergrad school, and was a tutor for that year for undergrad students. So
nice.
kind of going through anatomy and kind of tutoring anatomy, which kind of helped solidify anatomy, which is absolutely vital in this profession.
And teaching it too, especially, really makes it stick.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's one thing to learn it, but when you teach it, it kind of forces you to learn it at a whole deeper level.
Yeah, definitely.
And then beyond that, I did some like after school science club stuff for cool. kids in Omaha. So.
Good. So then applied to PA school, got in, obviously. Congratulations.
Yep, thank you.
And then like all through school, did you have any idea that you wanted to go into pulmonary and critical care, or was it, I want to keep my options open and see what strikes me?
Yeah, well, I mean, initially I thought, okay, orthopedic medicine is what I want to do, because that's what I had exposure in. But after going through the didactic portion, the book part of PA school, I was kind of a little more open to different possibilities. I definitely like orthopedics and stuff like that, but you don't really know until you're in it. But it was until I got into my rotation year that I was exposed to everything, kind of an in-depth view of different specialties in medicine, and pulmonary got me excited. So
yeah. And that was an elective, right?
Yep, it was an elective. So
how'd you pick that one?
Yeah, so the program that I went to, they have 10 required rotations, and then you could have a 1 month block where you could do a full month in one discipline, or you could split up into 2 weeks in 2 different specialties. And I decided to do a whole month in pulmonary because, going through the didactic portion and having guest lecturers in from the community, I knew that if I would do a pulmonary rotation, I would see the sickest of the sick. I'd be really exposed to kind of the most critical patients out there. So I kind of wanted to throw myself in the deep end of the pool to really see some stuff and kind of, I don't know exactly how to put it, but just kind of desensitize myself to really critical patients.
Kind of see what it's like to actually take care of those patients.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because it's intimidating. You can learn it in a book, but to see it and even, the effects on the patient, the effects on the family, all that stuff, that's pretty heavy stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
So spending a month doing it, I think, for anybody is probably a wise choice. Especially since it's a good part of the PANCE exam too, is pulmonary issues.
Yeah, I can't remember what exact. I know cardiovascular is number 1. I think pulmonary is number 2.
It's number 2. I think between the two of them, it's like 40% or something crazy high.
I know it's like cardiovascular, pulmonary, and GI.
Yeah,
I think it's those 3. If you can get through those 3, I think your chances of passing are pretty good.
I just recertified, and I somehow must have gotten like the GI specific test, because it was like every hepatitis question I could come up with. I was like, whoa. They didn't read the same blueprint I read. So, good. So, okay, in school, wanted to be with the sickest of the sick. So you spent a month on a rotation with your current employer, right?
Yes. Yep.
And did that help you think, land a job after graduation?
Yeah. So one thing that I did at most of my rotations is I would leave a resume at the very end of it, and I was fortunate enough that my current employer liked me as a student. They I worked really hard on that rotation, kind of make an impression. And when I left a resume, I was fortunate enough that they called me 2 weeks later after I left that rotation and extended an offer.
Wow.
I was really, really, really blessed in that. But yeah, that would be my advice to students. When you're rotating, in a particular group or specialty, work very hard, be very eager to learn, and leave a resume.
Yeah. I'm shocked at the number of people that don't leave resumes. And, a lot of times, the jobs or, that they're not hiring or something like that, but you never know who we know, you never know who, if you run into somebody and let's say I was your student and you could be like, hey, Chris was a solid dude. You should take a look at him. You might pass it on to 3 or 4 of your friends that are in different specialties, and that could lead to a job. So, good advice there for sure. And then what month was your rotation? Or like how close to graduation, I should say.
So I started that rotation, I believe, middle of November, ended it, I think, a couple weeks before the new year. And then they extended the offer, I think the first or second week in January. So, and then that was about 6 months before I graduated.
Yeah,
so
it was a May graduation,
right? May graduation, and had a job by January, that was great.
That's good. Well, and that's good advice. If you know where you want to be or what you want to do, if you can do a rotation in, either or both of those places, that can definitely help you and take the stress off at graduation. My goodness.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
Absolutely.
6 months of, I got something tied up. I'm ready to go.
Yeah. And, last 6 months of PA school, you can't coast.
No, you sure can't.
You have a thing called boards coming up that you have to get ready for. But, it was kind of nice to take that pressure off of, okay, I don't have to, apply to a million jobs, right before graduation, because you have a million things that you have to do before you graduate from a program. So that was nice to have that stressor off my plate.
Yeah. For the first 6 months of your rotations, you were leaving resumes everywhere, and
for the most part, that was something that I learned a few months into rotations, leaving resumes. Some of my rotations were in parts of the country that I didn't really have interest in moving to, so I didn't leave a resume there. But definitely my rotations that were in, since we're both, we're in Nebraska, kind of leaving resumes in, kind of Lincoln or Omaha. I definitely did that, but so not every job. I mean, if you know that it's a potential place where you would want to work, definitely leave a resume.
Yeah, especially after you spend a month there, you kind of know: do I get along with the people? Do I fit with the culture?
Absolutely.
Is this someplace I want to be? And even if it isn't, maybe you like the people, but you didn't like the subject matter so much. It's still good to leave a resume because you don't know who those people might come in contact with and refer you on to.
Yeah,
so
true.
Cool. So, all right, let's get into like your typical day. How's your day structured? Do you, I know you're in the hospital some of the time, you're in the clinic some of the time. What's a day look like for you? Just a typical average day.
Yeah. So from a quality of life standpoint, my current job is excellent. That's one thing I liked about the practice model where I currently work. So it's a Monday through Friday job, with weekends every 6 to 8 weeks. So Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 is kind of the expectation. With any job, you may have to work a little later, but working in medicine, to have an 8 to 5 job is kind of unheard of. So
for sure.
So I work in a hospital-based practice, and so day typically starts off by seeing new consults. So any new patients that need to be seen by the pulmonary service, I'll start seeing those patients first, and then if there's any medications I think that they need to be on, or any inhalers or anything like that, I'll make those adjustments. Just kind of get a good handle on what's going on with the patient, and then I'll staff that patient with my supervising physician, and they kind of have the final say so on what the direction of care will be. So,
and is that the same person every day, or does that change based on who's on the hospital service?
Yeah.
Or something like
that? So I work in a group that I think I should know the number, but I think there's like 12 or 13 physicians, and there's about 8 PAs, nurse practitioners, and the mid-levels we will be at a facility for a month, and the docs will rotate every week. So I'll work with a new physician every week. So it kind of just depends.
Just depends on who's on that
Yeah,
day and
yeah.
stuff like that. Okay. So then when you say see new patients for the pre-PA or even current PA students, you're consulted, meaning you're usually not the admitting service from the ER. Is that right?
Yeah.
Someone else will admit them, whether it's the hospitalist or something like that. And then they call you for your guys' expertise. You kind of come take their history, figure out, home meds, clarify things that maybe aren't clear, and then kind of go from there. Is that correct?
Yeah. So if it's a pretty straightforward, pneumonia, community acquired, very non-complicated patient, we may not be consulted on them. But patients who have very severe COPD, for example, or they have a history of, pulmonary histoplasmosis or pulmonary hypertension, or it's a huge laundry list of things. Sometimes they'll want to have us on board, just kind of weigh in and make sure that from a pulmonary perspective, the patient is taken care of.
Sure. And then let's say you've seen all the consults, you're kind of caught up. Do you make rounds with the physician or independent of the physician?
Yeah. So after seeing the new consults that kind of come in overnight, patients that we do have a physician that's on call overnight, but if it's a non-urgent consult, they'll wait for the morning. So after we see those patients, I'll start rounding on patients that we've already seen, kind of the day-to-day, seeing how they're doing. We'll, ramp up antibiotics or, scale down or change steroids or inhalers or what. So I'll round independently, and then kind of my supervising physician will follow in my wake, so to speak. So I'll leave a progress note, just kind of a note saying, what's going on with the patient, here's how they feel, here's my physical exam, here's my assessment and plan. For PA students, that's called a SOAP note. I'll leave one of those, and my physician he or she will put in a testament on my note saying, I agree with the above, or, they'll make changes as they see fit.
Yeah. So it's quite a bit of autonomy. It's not like you're rounding together side by side, you're documenting while they're seeing the patient, which some practices, that is how they do it, where, you're kind of hand in hand with the physician at all times. You get to go ahead of them, kind of see who needs to be seen, and then circle back with them and stuff like that.
Yeah. And sometimes it just depends on the day or how busy we are. Sometimes we do round together, because sometimes that may be the more efficient approach for that day.
Yeah.
But typically I'll round first and they'll follow in my wake.
Yeah. So you can kind of get through the people you need to get through. Your physicians will spend time in the ICU. Is that right? They'll kind of do rounds in the morning with ICU nurses and things. So then you're out doing your thing, they're doing their thing. You guys meet up, and then we're efficient round together. Cool.
Yeah.
So tell me about the clinic. What's the clinic atmosphere like?
So we will rotate through hospitals or facilities in town, but then we'll have time in clinic where we see patients completely independently. Just for we do also specialize in sleep medicine and things like that. So obstructive sleep apnea and things like that. We'll see those patients. Pulmonary nodules with follow-up CT scans. We'll see those in the clinic as well. And one thing I really appreciate about the practice that I work with is in the clinic, if there's a patient that I'm not exactly sure what to do with, if they're a little more complex than what I'm comfortable dealing with on my own, a physician is always available. So I can kind of drag them over to the computer and say, hey, can you look at the CT scan for me and tell me what you think about this nodule, or what should I do with this patient? And the physicians I work with are just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, they're excellent teachers and always willing to weigh in on a patient.
Yeah, that's important, and that's something that's necessary, because even though you've passed boards and things, you're not the expert, on really anything at that point. You've got a solid base, but you still have a ton of room to grow, even family practice or whatnot. So that's a good point, is make sure that the people that you're joining are at least interested in helping you grow, which is number one. Number two would be not to be afraid to ask questions. I remember being a PA student, and early on we had to shadow PAs, and I remember one of them saying like, I can always ask the doctor if I have a question, and I was like, I'm never going to be that guy. I'm gonna know everything, and I am so thankful.
Little did you know.
Little did I know that, man, you get out here and you're like, these are real people, and I don't know everything. So it is nice to, I can handle the bulk of what we see and stuff, but it's always good to be able to bounce ideas off of somebody and then kind of learn from that experience. And, it might be the only time you have to ask that question, but there's always going to be another question to ask. So that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah, cool. Absolutely. And then one thing I love about this profession is you are just constantly learning. I mean, the learning does not stop after you pass boards. I mean, I'm reflecting back on, my knowledge base a year ago, when I passed boards, and I thought I knew a lot. And yeah, it's kind of the learning you do after graduation is just exponential.
Yeah. And a lot of times people will say, I passed boards, like I can cruise now, like show up to your job and where's my office and where's my CME budget and where's all this stuff. And you're like, ugh, it's now the work is actually starting because this is making a real effect on people's lives. And, learning's not done when graduation comes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good. What's anything else about your day? Pretty much do you get to make your schedule as far as how many people you see in a day, or are you like, I'm here 8 to 5, fill me up if you want? Do you have any free time during the day, or are you kind of booked up?
So are you talking more clinic or hospital?
Yeah.
Clinic, typically, so when I first started in clinic, they kind of hold your hand a little bit, so to speak. They started my patient load off pretty small. I think I saw maybe 8 to 9 patients a day, which is, I'm seeing twice that now.
Wow.
So the typical day in the clinic, I'll see maybe 14 to 16 patients.
What kind of appointments are they? Like 15 minutes?
Mostly 15. Sometimes they'll, it's like for hospital follow-up. So after we see a patient in the hospital, we'll schedule them to come see us in our office because we just want to kind of lay eyes on them and make sure that they're doing okay, make sure they got their meds and everything like that. The hospital follow-ups will take about half an hour, but most appointments in the clinic will be about 15 minutes.
Okay. And are you pretty much, do you get a lunch break or do you?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I'm glad I get a lunch break for sure. So I get about an hour for lunch. And during that time, it would be nice to eat, but also catch up on charts. So you're still kind of working during that lunch break, but you have time to kind of take a breath and kind of catch up on some charting.
Sure. Yeah, sometimes I'm a talker, and so inevitably I run late, so if we used to have morning clinics in the past, and it would always, take me right up to surgery at 1 o'clock or whatever was scheduled, and I was like, I just shot myself in the foot just yapping. But what's your favorite part of the job?
I just love taking care of people, just kind of meeting people in their, sickest state and kind of being there for them. And I think that's the draw for me. It's I'm a people person, and one thing I really appreciate about science about medicine is it's science and your love for humanity holding hands. So you really get to connect with people, but also you use your brain and kind of figure out what's going on with patients, and it's kind of helping them through, kind of dark times in their life. So.
Yeah. It's not just the science. And I think a lot of people, that's what you learn in school, right? Is all the science stuff, but then to come out and figure out how do I relate to this person that I actually don't have anything in common with? Or a lot of conditions that we see are a result of bad choices, smoking or, poor diet, and people are stubborn and they don't want to quit. So how do you relate to those people, and how do you convince them to change how they're living and stuff like that? It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Did anything surprise you about your job as a PA? When now that you're out a year, anything jump out at you and should be like, I never thought I'd get to do this? Or is there anything that you're like, I didn't know that I was going to be stuck with this responsibility?
Sure. And I was thinking about that question, and I think the advantage to rotating with the place where I'm working now is there weren't many surprises. So that's one advantage, I think, to working a place where you rotate is you after a month of being someplace, you get a pretty good feel for what to expect out of the job, and what your life will look like if you accept a position there. So wasn't really surprised by a ton. I think the thing that surprises me the most is just people. There's a lot of sick people in the world. There's just a lot of sick, really, really sick people. And that kind of most of my family is very healthy. So, which has been a huge blessing, but like being just kind of seeing people at their absolute sickest. And even when we discharge them from the hospital, they are still incredibly sick. So I think that was one thing that kind of surprised me the most, and you think that, you'd be, used to that after going through school, but I think it's just something that I'm really starting to appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. They're not, just because they're leaving the hospital doesn't make them healthy.
No.
So, and just because they didn't ever go to a doctor before doesn't mean they're healthy either. So, as you've probably found out. Any crazy patient stories? Either crazy conversations? Of course, you got to follow HIPAA guidelines here, but anything just completely nuts that, if you're joking with some friends or, I got a story for you.
There's always patients that, you kind of feel like you're beating your head against the wall, talking to them about life choices and life decisions. A lot of poor decisions are made with alcohol, and I've learned that for sure. And then I think I've been able to see some pretty cool pathology. We had one patient. She has severe rheumatoid arthritis, and she was on methotrexate and Remicade, and I can't remember the mechanism of action of those medications off the top of my head, but basically they suppress your immune system,
right.
And so it kind of makes you susceptible to opportunistic infections. Well, she came in to the hospital short of breath, which that's our number one reason for consultation is shortness of breath. So it could be anything, but we get a chest X-ray of this lady, and she didn't have any pulmonary history whatsoever, but her chest film was just white on both sides. Oh. So we're like, we need to get a better picture. So we did a CT scan with contrast, and her lungs were just completely full of this white stuff. We weren't sure what it was. So one of my physicians did a bronchoscopy, which is kind of like an endoscopy or colonoscopy, but a bronchoscopy is going in through the trachea into the bronchial tree and washing it out. And actually, you can take biopsies of the lungs through a bronchoscopy, and came back positive for histoplasmosis. Oh. So it's like a fungus, and this poor patient. She really, non-smoker, doesn't drink, very, very, very healthy. She just unfortunately caught a really bad histo infection from being on some rheumatoid arthritis medications. So
her immune system is suppressed and kind of took advantage.
And you kind of see some interesting stuff from that. Man. So
I remember, I think we do lung biopsies and stuff. If a lot of times you guys will call and say like, hey, we've tried all our therapies. Can you get us a little piece of tissue to send to the lab? And one of the most interesting ones, and you never want to be the interesting, right? Like that's usually
as a patient, no.
No, you usually don't. You want to be really boring. But the pathologist called and said, this is the most interesting thing I've ever seen. And I thought, that's not good when a pathologist says that. But very sweet mid-30s lady with shortness of breath.
That's young.
Yeah. And so we were like, wow, what's going on? So we take this biopsy, we send it to the pathologist. Pathologist called us and the pulmonologist, and so they had a meeting, and he said, I've only read about this in a book. He said, but this is from microemboli, that was killing, little microemboli are just like little chunks of something that are in the bloodstream. And he said, I the only time I've seen it in this distribution is when people are crushing up pills and injecting them. They're not melting them down, they're just crushing them up and dissolving them in they think they're dissolving them in water, and then they inject it. And so we had to have the conversation with this person of, it's super odd, right? Like that seems like a stretch. Like I'm not going to go into this poor lady's, she's like a teacher or something like that.
In her mid-30s.
I was like, you're not the stereotypical person that's going to crush up pills and inject them.
Right.
And we went in and we said, here's what the pathologist said. We need to ask you. And she broke down into tears, and she's like, I have an oxycodone problem, and they weren't effective anymore. And so then I started crushing them and injecting them, thinking I could get more of a high from it. And we were like, oh my word. Like you never know what people are going to say.
Yeah.
So terrible story. Just like completely shocking, but we never would have guessed it. And we almost didn't ask because we thought, well, we don't want to be too forward, but
right.
It's now that we know what it is, we can treat it and we can figure it out. And she did fine, but scary, kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Don't do that, listeners. Okay. Okay. So 2 more questions. They're both about advice. You had talked about shadowing, which would be more specific to the pre-PA population. Tell me more about that. What's your advice on shadowing?
So I would shadow as many providers as possible, just to kind of expose yourself to what's out there, kind of learn as much medical lingo as possible, because it's its own language. It's one thing that I learned going into this is, just medicine is its own language. And, as a PA student, you want to go, oh, I've never heard of that before. You kind of want to just expose yourself to as much as possible. So as a pre-PA, I would definitely encourage shadowing, because I think it would show, people interviewing you for, seats in a PA program, that you actually have investigated the profession. You know what you're getting yourself into. You've done your homework. You kind of know what to expect, on the other side of school. Because, sometimes when I've asked, college students, what do you want to do? Or I'm sorry, high school students, what do you want to do after high school? And I want to go to PA school. Well, that's a little different than saying I want to be a physician assistant. So I think exposing yourself to the PA profession after the program and kind of seeing what it looks like, I think it helps show the interview panel at whatever school you decide to apply to knows that you know what you're getting yourself into. And two, I think it helps you realize, okay, is this something that I really want to invest my life into? Because becoming a PA definitely is a massive investment. You have to make a lot of sacrifices. I think going into it as educated as possible it will behoove you to be as educated as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, even a step further is to shadow while you're in school, which a lot of schools will have you shadow somebody, each semester or something, but just to kind of keep it relevant, that the stuff that you're learning actually does apply at some point.
Absolutely.
So, but good point about knowing what you're getting into, not just being in love with an idea, but actually loving the job and the responsibilities. Okay, how about advice at graduation? So you talked about leaving resumes behind at every rotation. Anything else that you'd say, here's the one thing I've learned in this first year that I was, would go back and tell myself differently, or anything like that?
Yeah, and I think we touched on it earlier. After graduation, you take the pants, you pass boards, you get your certificate from the mail, you get your license from the state of wherever. It all feels good. But I think the critical thing, and we touched on this earlier, is work as hard as possible when you're a student on rotations. Show up early. Stay late if you can. Show an interest in learning. All of this reflects well on you. And physicians talk to each other about students, believe it or not. And it's kind of amazing to me how word gets around. Especially if you're doing multiple rotations in one city, likelihood of physicians knowing one another is very high. So. Definitely work as hard as possible. Show interest. If have you talked about pimping on?
There was one Q&A episode where somebody was like, what can I say? I don't know if I'm getting pimped.
Yeah. So
not.
Pimping is when your preceptor will ask you a question about whatever. I've never had a bad experience by saying I don't know, but I was sure as heck to research it that night and then come back and explain in detail what it meant. So I think if your preceptor is a doc or PA or whatever, I think saying I don't know is okay, in moderation, of course. But saying I don't know is okay, but definitely do your research on it, because it says, okay, I'm taking this seriously. When you get out of school, you are responsible for, people's health, which is, just absolutely, vital. So, show an interest that you actually care about, pathologies, because, people have pathologies and they need to be treated. So
I think that the rule that I heard was, give it a try. If they pimp you, they ask you some question, even if you don't know, make an educated guess, because you'd be surprised how often you could be at least close to right.
Mm-hmm.
But then eventually, any good pimper would know that you ask another question and then another one until they say, I don't know. So it is fine to say, I don't know, but I wouldn't start with that. I would at least give it a shot.
Sure.
And even if you're wrong, you might feel dumb for a second, but I guarantee you won't forget it. And that's actually why that, I think, phenomenon has persisted through the years, is that it actually does help you remember things.
Yeah.
As much as I hate to do it, but I mean, I'll ask questions more as from an educational standpoint, not so much a pimping standpoint. But there's always the go-tos, and we talked about there's a medical recall book and surgical recall on a previous episode. But those are two great books. I don't know if you used them in school, but they're kind of like the pimp guide. So, not in a bad way. I haven't read that book, but it's like, if you're going to do a gallbladder, or if someone comes in DKA or something like that, like what are the main things? And it's a great book to kind of review, but inevitably the follow-up question wasn't in the book and you're going to be stumped. But yeah, it's good. Well, cool. Well, I don't have anything else for you. Anything else you can think of that we didn't cover or that you need to share?
I'm trying to think. Nothing comes to mind. So, yeah.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And we'll hopefully, if anybody's got any questions, of course, you can email us questions@pastartup.co. But otherwise, Nick, thanks for your time, and we'll catch up with you some other time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool. Thanks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was my conversation with Nick Kincaid. Appreciate Nick being here. He was a great conversationalist. Great tidbits in there, right? I mean, leaving the resume with his, rotations, obviously trying to get rotations where you might want to work. It's basically like a free month or 6 weeks or however long your rotation is of a trial to see if you like the people, you like the place, you like the responsibilities. And then shadowing. He made a really good point to shadow as much as you can. So for two reasons. One, to make sure that you know what you're getting into. And number two, to show the admissions committee that you're committed. You know that you kind of have a broad understanding of what the PA profession is. In a couple weeks, I've got an interview with Mike Huckabee, who is not the presidential candidate, but rather the program director at Mayo Clinic's new PA program, and we actually talk about that in that episode. So that will be episode, I believe, 18. So look for that one, but we talk about shadowing and stuff like that there. As always, don't forget the PA Startup Podcast is sponsored by Audible. You can get a free 30-day trial with a free ebook. Free audiobook from audible.com. If you go to pastartup.com/audible, you can get that free trial. And again, put your credit card information in, get that free book, and then you can cancel right up to the 30th day of the month or 31st, whatever it is, with nothing out of your pocket, but you get that free book. And a couple bucks head our way just to say thanks for referring people there. So definitely help us out by checking that out. And that's what I know. So episode 17 next week is a great episode with Stephen Pasquini, who is the PA Life guy. If you've been to the PALife.com, he's got several different websites and programs that he offers for PA students, pre-PA, and just PAs in general. So great conversation with him and about family practice and things that he's been up to. So definitely check that next week. And we'll check in with you then, okay? See you later.
Dad, we have to go.
Where are we going?
To the UNL gymnastics camp.
Oh, the Husker gymnastics camp. Are you ready?
Yep.
Got your grips?
Mm-hmm.
Got your leotard?
Yep.
Got your water bottle?
Yep.
What else do you need?
Swimsuit.
Swims? Oh, you're going swimming. All right, I got to go. Be right back.